Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing a lot better than I was last week. As of this recording, I've recovered from a bout of what I'm pretty sure was norovirus. Is the worst nausea I have experienced in recent memory. But I'm feeling a lot better now, and I'm especially happy to be over that. If anything, because I'm glad I was able to get over it before this really nice brunch that I ended up going to with some friends and my wife in Queens. Excellent place called Queens Comfort. Does a very excellent prefix brunch. I was really excited about it, so I was really glad I was able to recover in time for that. I'm also really looking forward to, by the time you hear this, this will be the week of the next Backdoor Barbecue. That's my sketch comedy group. Our next shows are going to be at the People's Improv Theater later this week. If you were listening to this on the week that it comes out, we will be at the Pit Loft. Well, I guess it's just the Pit now in New York City on 29th Street on February 16th at 7 p.m. and February 18th at 7:30 p.m. We're going to be doing 2 sketch comedy shows, so get tickets now at the pitnyc.com for that. And in a related note, my guest on the show today was a cast member of the most recent iteration of Backdoor Barbecue. Mackenzie Jaquish is my guest today. I met her from doing the most recent Backdoor Barbecue show, but she's also very active in stand-up comedy in New York, and she also produces a very popular show at the Pit called Love is Live, which is a live dating show. And in the course of working on the most recent Backdoor Barbecue sketch shows, I really got to know all of that cast, and so I'm very slowly getting everyone that was involved. I had Sunny Outlaw on the show, and now we're going to talk to Mackenzie, who I've only known relatively recently, but she she's doing a lot of the right things when it comes to being funny in New York and producing shows in New York. So I was inspired by this conversation. I hope if you're listening to this, there is something that you can take from it as well. So thank you all again so much for being here to listen to this. And if you want to hear more and you want to help support the show, couple ways you can do that for free. If you listen to this on Apple Podcasts, if you want to leave us a 5-star review, rating and review, that helps us in the presence of our almighty algorithmic overlords. And if you want to give the show a follow on Spotify or Stitcher, that will be helpful as well. So again, if you want to leave us a rating review on Apple, that will help out the show a lot. And if you are interested in more, you can go to awesomedisaster.com, get links to everything related to me and what I do, and more links to the show. So I appreciate you if you check those out. And let's talk to Mackenzie. I try to do like at least a touch of research, but I feel like with comedians, it's just like it's just like chatting in the break room. Kind of.
Exactly.
When you really think about it. So something I kind of wanted to start this by kind of continuing one of our ongoing conversations from the rehearsal where we met is you're from Calgary.
Yeah, Calgary, Alberta.
Calgary, Alberta. So for some reason, and I think this might just be my other Canadian friends messing with me, but I'm being told that it's pronounced Calgary, but I've never heard anyone call it Calgary. It's always been Calgary to me.
So are they from Calgary or are they just Canadian?
They might just be Canadian, but I'm not sure.
So people outside of Calgary call it Calgary because that's how it's spelled. So that's absolutely correct. And also we're referred to as Calgarians. So you would think that would make sense. But when you're local there, it's just Calgary. It's kind of like how Toronto they don't pronounce the R's in their words, so it's Toronto when you're there.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things. It's a Canadian accent thing, I think.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because I called it Toronto for the longest time before I started saying Toronto,
Yeah.
which I get, but I had never heard that part of it, that pronunciation before.
The Toronto?
The,
Yeah.
yeah, I had, or yeah, where you drop the R. That's interesting to me. I also know because I have a couple friends who are from Newfoundland, and they call themselves Newfies, and that's like a whole other thing. Like Newfoundlanders are viewed separately from the rest of mainland Canada. I've
So
realized.
Newfoundland, the accent in Newfoundland is basically Irish, which doesn't make sense, but that's how it sounds. They don't pronounce
Uh
any
huh.
of their syllables. They just like muddle together words. And my first boyfriend ever was like from Newfoundland, and he was a radio DJ, and so I heard that voice all the time. And so in my mind,
Uh
I'm
huh.
like, that voice is very attractive. But then I hear people talking, I'm like, no, it's
Mm-hmm.
not. You gotta stop.
I imagine it's like a Texas accent,
Yes.
or or like Foghorn Leghorn. Like there's a certain like now I say so, I do declare, I do declare. Like if you're in a Tennessee Williams play, there's a certain kind of romanticism to that. But I imagine to everyone else, it's like, oh, I imagine I don't want to hear what your views are on certain political topics.
Like 100%. Like it, especially Newfoundland can feel romantic at times too. Like, oh, there's like the water and like lighthouses, but at the end of the day, the things you end up having in common with them are slim to none.
Sure. Do you know about the mummers? Are you familiar with this
No, what's
phenomena?
that?
So in Newfoundland, like when the last time my wife and I were there, we were in St. John's, and we're like walking along the colored houses and all the fun shops, and apparently, mummers was I don't know if it was like a holiday tradition or what, but apparently mummers were these people that would dress up in like hats and like very odd clothes, but the key part is that there's like a white mat, there's like a white bed sheet that goes over your face, and this is supposed to be like a holiday tradition in Canada, but that reads very differently in the lower 48. Because I remember being in the shop and be like, this would not play well anywhere else but here.
I don't think it plays well there. Like if I was in Newfoundland and that was happening, I'd be like, what are we doing? Okay, I didn't know that. Honestly, I'm beyond shocked that that's a thing. But all right, no,
Yeah. So Calgary, what was growing up there like? Because my idea of that particular province is that that's like cowboy country when it comes to Canada. Was that your experience growing up? Did you grow up near the city or more like rural?
I grew up in a small town outside of the city called Crossfield, but was very rodeo. Like my older sister was a rodeo princess, which is basically just being like a beauty pageant on a horse, is how I describe it to people.
Uh
But
huh.
that also meant that when she won, we had to then tour all the little towns that also had rodeos, all the way up to Calgary Stampede. So I would
Uh
spend my
huh.
summers sitting on a bleacher watching her ride a horse because I had no interest in any of it. But yeah, very cowboy country. And like I've ridden a horse. I have a hat. I have boots. Like I can do it. I just don't
Uh
like
huh.
doing it.
Sure. Sure. Rodeo princess. I have never heard of that. That's
I
amazing.
knew that was the part that was gonna stand out. Because how could it not? It's such like
Uh huh.
a silly thing that we did, and that she doesn't even talk about today. Like we were at Christmas, and she has a boyfriend of like 6 years, and I like brought it up to him, and he had no idea what I was talking about. And I was like, this huge
Uh
part
huh.
of her life, she doesn't bring up to people. All it is like at a rodeo, there'll be like this section where they're like, and now it's time for the rodeo princesses. And they'll come out, they look beautiful. They're all like blonde, gorgeous prom queens on horses, and they'll carry flags and they'll do little tricks and little dances to like a Luke Bryan song. And then
Uh
they
huh.
volunteer at like the like farmers markets and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. Amazing. Yeah, with like some like retired like second division hockey player,
Yes,
I would
exactly.
imagine. um, what was that like? So what was that like for you? Were you like secretly like in the bleachers, like, oh, I want to be on the horse, or were you like, no, that's in all you,
I
sis?
think my parents always described it as just like defiant, that if I wanted to try it, I probably would have loved it, but I don't think that's the case. I never had an interest in it. The timing of this, timeline wise, she became a rodeo princess the same year Twilight came out, like the books.
Ooh, uh huh,
And so I remember sitting under the bleachers reading Twilight out loud to my little sister, who was like too little to even make a choice if she wanted to do rodeo or Twilight.
uh
And
huh.
that to me, I liked the idea of that story of not Twilight, who cares about Twilight, but the idea that
Right.
I was like, no, and then one day I'll be successful because I'm the one who wasn't on the horse. Like, I liked that narrative I was creating.
Ah, yes, yes. No, I know exactly what you mean. I was not too dissimilar because I was before I like really found myself in my sophomore year of high school. I was very much that kind of like shut in like gamer kid, and I learned recently, this is something I've been working on in my stand up, is that where I grew up is not even big enough to be a town. I'm officially from somewhere a place called that is a census designated place.
That is crazy. Do you know what a paper town is?
No, what's a
A
paper town?
paper town is a town that they created only on maps to prove that people were copywriting maps. So like years ago when like there wasn't the internet. But now people have like set up homes on those little towns in the map, even though the census doesn't
Uh huh.
recognize them. And that kind of sounds like, I think you got a novel here, man. Like that sounds kind of like what your town is like made up, like it's not real.
No, no. Basically, like the what I say on what I've been saying is, I'm just from a big enough collection of people living in the woods that the government's like, we should keep an eye on that. Um, um, but not too dissimilar to where you're from. Like where I grew up is like an hour south of Washington D.C., so it's like a lot of like inside beltway types, lobbyists, politicians, like summer homes and people who work in Baltimore. Uh, like it's basically like a vacation spot. Like it's if you have a boat, it's a great time. If you like to fish, it's a great time. And then there's like old my like all the my mom and like all my the parents, the moms I knew are like former hippies, and then all the dads are like in a hunting and ATVs.
Yes, ATVs are. I'm glad you said ATVs because that's like a huge part of it, of that culture for some reason. And then you always hear about these like insane accidents on ATVs, and it's like you're choosing to go out and do that. Like it's not. It's an
Mm-hmm.
optional sport because it's not even a sport. You're not physically moving your body. I could rant about ATVs for hours, because that's just like such a
Uh-huh.
silly part of this culture. I can get on board with like a lot of the other things like rodeos and all
Mm-hmm.
that, but ATVs, I'm like, why are we doing that?
Right. Like I'll even give a pass to like motocross or like BMX bikes because at least those are in the X Games, but ATVs haven't made it to the X
When
Games
it
yet.
makes it
I
to
don't
the X
think.
Games, call me, but until then, I don't understand the purpose.
Exactly. Then it's legit. And what were your parents like? Were the, imagining like again, I hate to paint in broad
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
stereotypes of Canadians, but I imagine they're pretty nice people.
I mean, wouldn't it be so funny? Because like my parents will definitely listen to this. Because well, no, what? Let's be. My mom will listen to this. It'd be funny if I said they weren't because they are. They're such lovely people. My mom was a
Mm-hmm.
teacher and my dad was a
Uh
firefighter.
huh.
So like very classic like jobs.
Oh, absolutely. What grade did she
So
teach?
she actually taught kindergarten. And then for a while, she was
Uh
working at a
huh.
preschool, and the other female teacher, one other teacher, turned out to be my mother-in-law. So that's how oh my god, my grandmother, her mother-in-law.
Uh huh.
That story almost took a very different turn. It turned out to be her
Right.
future mother-in-law, and that's how she met my dad, was like through teaching.
Oh, there are a lot more parallels to our upbringings than I was imagining, because my mom taught fifth
Oh
grade,
wow.
and And my stepsister, uh, I was born on her birthday, and my mom taught my now stepsister when she was like in like I think she was teaching second grade at the time, but in elementary school. So it's like very like Days of Our
Very
Lives.
Days of Our Lives. The characters get old enough, things change enough, which I like it when stuff like that happens in real life. We won't mention like I'm gonna talk about anything. We just won't mention names. I was having dinner.
Of course.
I was having dinner with a friend the other night, and she was talking about this guy she likes, and at the end she was like, and it's this guy, and it was a guy I used to have a crush on like years ago, and she's like, would you be mad if that happened? And I'm like, no, of course not. This is a 90210. Like, go date Jesse. His name's not Jesse, but 90210 character you want. Like, go date him. I don't care.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. It's not like I planted a flag and there's like this person's permanently off limits. Also, they're like a human with like autonomy and free will.
Yeah, they get choices in this too. They're not like, I guess Mackenzie liked me 4 years ago. I can't date anyone else.
Oh my God. Yeah. Those are the kinds of things like when you go home for the holidays and there's like that person, you run into like that person who never left like at the bar or something. And then they're just like, oh, you remember 8th grade or whatever. It's like, no, I don't. I've literally not thought about it since
that happened.
The day it ended.
Yeah. And that my sister's not one of them, but rodeo princesses I think end up falling into that category. My older sister became a pilot and like moved on from that life. But like I definitely do think the girl who was in my grade who became our grade's rodeo princess, I ran into her over Christmas and she's very much so like, do you remember when I was rodeo princess? And I'm like, I don't think about you anymore, actually.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, I don't know if you realize, but there's a whole world outside of the 20 miles that we grew up in. So it's really cool. You should check it out sometime.
Ever want to take a trip?
You know, they call...
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, they make so many more movies than what comes to the theater here. It's not just... So you have two sisters?
I do.
Or just one?
I have two. I'm the middle child.
Two sisters. Okay. So like kind of fighting for attention on both ends of the spectrum.
People have like said that to me, and it's been like alluded, especially because I was the baby for like 9 years, and then my little sister came along. So there's also like that aspect of it. Mm-hmm. But my little sister Amy is my best friend and like my entire world. So there was never a moment of, oh, you took being a baby away from me. It was more, oh, I have a baby now. Like, this is now my baby to take care of. Mm-hmm. And she's, like, graduating. I got her grad photos today. So that's, like, crazy.
Aw. Oh, that's great. So when you were growing up, did you like comedy or like have a particular, like, interest in movies or TV, or did that come later? Because I'm so sorry.
No, you give your answer. Give me a minute to think about it. You give your answer.
I talk about myself a lot sometimes on this. Well, because as far as like what most cool comedy people talk about is like the things that got them into comedy, like watching David Letterman or Conan or Saturday Night Live. I didn't get into any of that stuff until I was much older.
Interesting. Like none of it at all? Were your parents into it?
My parents, I know they liked movies, and my dad was big into auto racing. Like that was his thing, like monster trucks and stuff. But, my mom like was kind of protective about what I watched. Like if it was a cartoon, all day, every day, all day, watch all the cartoons you want. But when it came to like The Simpsons or like Seinfeld, anything that like she heard was like maybe inappropriate, she wouldn't let me watch, which is crazy because Ren and Stimpy slipped through. And I'd argue that that's worse.
It is funny how that like sneaks through. I wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons, but one time I was homesick and she just like flipped on the TV and like whatever cartoon it landed on, she'd like let me watch. And one time it was like South Park, which like not saying South Park and Simpsons are worse, but like that also was not like appropriate if Simpsons wasn't. But my parents would kind of supervise what we watched, like certain things we just like The Simpsons, like I said, but I always knew something was really funny if they did insist we watch it. Like, if my dad would, like, come home from work and be like, guys, SNL was crazy last night. You have to watch this clip. And that's how, like, I knew. I'm like, oh, this is, like, meaningful. Like, he is, like, taking
Mm-hmm.
up dinner conversation to talk about it, which I think, not to turn this into, like, a therapy session or anything, I think
Oh no, I like doing that on the show.
perfect, because comedy and my mental health are very linked.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, the first time I was ever in an uncomfortable situation around grown-ups and I made them laugh rather than feel any other emotion, in my brain that resonated as like, oh, this is an important thing. This is good. You know how to do this. And in the same way, when I saw
Uh-huh.
those grown-ups go, oh, this clip of Conan O'Brien is good, it registered in my brain as like, that's important. And so I think it's like this very weird validating thing of, if I can make these people laugh rather than feel a different emotion, I've done a
Mm-hmm.
good job. I've done something important.
That that's really profound. Like that makes total sense. Like when you first like that first time you kind of get a
Yeah.
laugh, it's kind of like a great feeling. And yeah, to like to in a very basic way, I've always felt like I was I was sharing happiness
Yeah.
in a way when I made somebody laugh, and that's a good positive thing I think to put out in the world and to share with the people in your life that you're close to. So there's something like kind of like really great about that first moment, and then I remember becoming like how I socialized because growing up like an only child in the woods, I didn't really know how to communicate very well. But then when I learned like, oh, funny people like funny, then I was like, oh, okay, I figured this out. I figured this aspect of communicating with humans.
Yes, exactly. And I think comedy was one of those things where like everyone agreed on it as to like what, not everyone agrees on what's funny, but everyone can agree on
Hmm.
like finding something funny. Whereas like music growing up was like very country music for me. Like everyone listened to country music in the town I lived in. But then as like
Mm.
high school happened and people were listening to music outside of that, I didn't know how to communicate anymore. I was like, I don't know who you're listening to. I only know Taylor Swift. And so then
Right.
the comedy, like if I could get them to switch the subject by doing what I just did by like making a joke about how I only listen to Taylor Swift or by listening to Weird Al Yankovic because I'm like, doesn't matter if he's good or not, he's funny. We can talk about how funny he is. Then I
Hmm.
could use that. And so I think it became kind of like my way to meet any person at their level by being like, if we can both find this funny, we can have something to talk about.
Absolutely. That is 100%. I found that with sports, with comedy, and then also internationally, like when it comes to soccer, if I have like the right hat and the right town on, uh, another great way to like get a conversation started with
People
someone.
love
I'm
hats.
very
People love commenting on hats. If you're wearing a hat, people love to talk about it.
Oh, absolutely. I want to talk about Weird Al for a second because I saw him at Carnegie Hall and it was amazing. I'm very curious, what era of Al is like your prime era of Al? Because I can imagine, because he's been around for, I think, as long as I've been alive. Each segment of the Weird Al fandom has like a different album. So I was curious what yours is.
So that's interesting because I get asked this question in a different way, but with Saturday Night Live, people are like, "What is the era you grew up in?" And like
Hmm.
timeline wise, I grew up in the era of like Andy Samberg and Seth Meyers and Jason Sudeikis. But how I was introduced to SNL was like David Spade and not Chevy, a little bit Chevy Chase, but David Spade for sure.
Hmm.
And same with Weird Al. Around timeline wise, it was White and Nerdy. But the first
Uh
song of
huh.
his I ever heard was Amish Paradise. And I like lost it. I
Yeah.
thought that was so funny. The small town we lived in had like an Amish colony. It's a colony, right? Is that the right term?
I'm not sure. I say
Community
community.
thing. That's probably better. I'm gonna get canceled on this podcast. Community. There's like an Amish community right outside the town, and so like that song, it like blew my mind. I'm like, we can joke about this now, like, and it was funny, and
Hmm.
I didn't even hear the original song, Gangster's Paradise, until like 6 years ago. Like, I had no idea. I'm like, that's just a
Uh-huh.
Weird Al song. Nothing else exists.
That's how I am with a lot of the current songs. Like I had never heard Fancy until I heard Handy.
Yeah.
Um and I'm trying to remember gosh. Well, I definitely knew because my album was Running with Scissors. Uh so I and the one song I remember laughing every time I was in the truck with my dad, and it was a truck. Uh the one song, because I remember like not really getting into Led Zeppelin, and I laughed at him when he played Ted Nugent. But he put in Don McLean, and I remember just listening to American Pie over and over and over and over and over again on the CD. So when Saga Begins came out, and there's like an American Pie song about Star Wars, because I was also a obsessive Star Wars person, I was like, oh, okay, this is my thing. And then another crazy like crossover of my interests with Weird Al is a few years ago for College Humor, he did a sketch where he was like the band leader on the Titanic as it was sinking. Where he plays the accordion and just sings like songs about how they're all gonna die. And it was just like, oh, this is another perfect intersection of interests for me. That's really cool. Yeah, he's timeless. Did you see his his movie, the new like parody biopic?
I did, and I liked it as it being a parody of a biopic. I did.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to know how it happened for him, and I think people are like. I was actually just having this conversation an hour before we got on here. Some people don't understand satire, and they're like, no, that is the story of his life, and I'm like, absolutely, it is not. He did not fuck Madonna and turn her into a drug lord. Like that did not happen. And they're like, well, the beginning parts, his dad gave him the idea. I'm like, no, but I actually do want to know how that all came to be. I unfortunately read that he had no relation to Madonna, which was heartbreaking because I actually think they would have made a great power couple.
Oh, that would have been amazing.
Would have been incredible. But I really did like the film. I really, really like Evan Rachel Wood, who played Madonna. And I really like the fact that she did an impression of her without doing an impression of her. Like, she didn't change anything about herself. Like, she just wore the outfit, and she's like, I'm Madonna now. Which is how I do impressions, so I was on board.
Oh, yeah. Like, I was watching it thinking, oh, Evan Rachel Wood should be Madonna for the Madonna biopic when that happens.
That got canceled, though. They canceled that. The Madonna biopic.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know it was happening.
It was happening, and they had...
Oh, man.
Do you watch, Ozarks. Do you watch Ozarks?
No.
Okay, I'm trying to think. Oh, Inventing Anna. Did you watch Inventing Anna? Like the Anna Delvey?
Yes.
The girl who played her in that was going to play Madonna.
Oh, okay. I could see that working really well too. But yeah, I just thought Evan Rachel Wood was just so perfect in that she and like that like prime like a virgin era Madonna, like 80s Madonna, like with the outfits, like she just looked exactly like her. I thought it was great. Another crazy like unrealized project. So I remember hearing on the DVD commentary of UHF, Weird Al's other movie from the 80s, that when that movie got greenlit, it means that he had to turn down opening for Michael Jackson on the Dangerous tour.
Wait, and is that true?
Yeah, like that's true. Like he says it in completely like matter of fact way. Like that commentary track is actually like really involved because like you could tell he's like sitting there with notes like okay, in this scene the voice is dubbed. Like it's really thorough.
First of all, I love these crossovers we're finding in our lives because I was also like I love listening to commentaries on movies. Something I did a lot, and I do love it when they take like a serious turn. Like the one I think I've watched the most, which is embarrassing, but the Wedding Crashers movie with Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn. They have a commentary that is actually really good because they take it so seriously, as if they're commenting on like the best work of art ever. They're like, yeah, we decided to dye Rachel McAdams' hair like raven for this scene, and I was like, raven? Her hair's brunette. What are we doing? You're Owen Wilson.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, so you're into SNL, and did you do like plays or anything in high school? Did you perform then? When did that start?
Oh, wait for this origin story because it's
All right.
everything I'm about to tell you, you're gonna be like, this makes sense with how I know her. Like, even if you know me a little bit. Um, so I was in the high school plays and I took them very seriously from day one because they said if you work
Mm-hmm.
hard from day one, by the beginning of grade 12, you'll be a lead in the play. So you have to show us you are
Mm-hmm.
committed from day one. So I like
Yep.
year one, I didn't have a part. I like swept the stage. I like threw away trash. I like worked so hard. Year two, they did Peter Pan. I got cast as like a pirate. So I'm in the background. I'm a pirate, whatever. Year three comes along, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get like a real name this time because grade 11, it's a big year. It's not the lead yet, but it's a big year. They're doing Annie. I get the apple seller,
Uh-huh.
which for those of you that have seen Annie, that's not a part. That's like not a thing. It's not Annie in the
Right.
apple cellar. But basically, they're showing all the poor people that live in Annie's town, and this apple seller walks by and is like poor and trying to sell apples. And they were like, we need time to change the sets in between the two scenes. So how about you go out and you like sell apples in the audience, and then like come on stage and the scene will
Okay.
start. And I'm like, okay, yeah. And they're like, just say apples. Like, that's all you have to say. It'll take a minute. And I turned it into a 5-minute stand up set. I was talking about the Great Depression. I was talking about Hoover Way. Like, I was going at it. And, like, so many people came up to me. They're like, that was the best part of the play. And, like, that is stand up comedy. Like, that would have been the first time I ever did
Yeah.
stand up. And I didn't know what it was
Uh-huh.
at the time, obviously. But, like, I just
Sure.
remember going, oh, I would rather do this than be Annie, who had to learn all those lines and sing all those songs. This felt so much better. Like just telling these
Uh-huh.
jokes. And then grade 12 came and they did Grease, and I did not get a lead. I was like student number two, but whatever.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes you don't
Oh.
win, kids. Sometimes it doesn't happen.
Oh yeah. Yeah, not always, but you make it work. Like the people that are like insert character name number 2 or like the third or fourth, those still work a lot. Those are all the people that have like 100 something IMDb
Yeah.
credits. That's I realized that's what I've always wanted to be. Like the only reason I ever thought like, oh, be like leads in movies cuz is that I thought that would guarantee work.
Yes.
Uh which not the case. But and especially like in the way show business is now, where like if you're really popular, you're under this like really finite microscope. I almost would rather be the kind of like fly under the radar and do these like DIY independent things that uh that are cool. That's yeah. And I would also say like everything I learned about how to be like a hard worker and be like a team player and like work with people, all of like these really important adult skills I learned doing
Yeah,
plays.
absolutely. It it requires, and I feel like probably sports do too, and I just don't play any sports. And like the sports I
Mhm.
did play in high school, like I ran track and field. That's not a team sport. That's you. But the
Yeah.
level of commitment you need to like be in a high school play, I had to get up at like 4 a.m. and my dad would have to drop me off at the school before work to get there for like the 6 a.m. rehearsal to like to have one line. It takes an insane amount of like dedication to not get
Mhm.
any of the credit. So I do think you're right that it teaches you these life skills without someone being like, this is a life skill. Like it teaches you through osmosis.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's a lot more fun to learn about like responsibility and stuff, like when you're getting taught how to run a table saw,
Yes,
or
exactly.
you're
Yeah.
like
While dressed
yeah,
like a
or you're or
pirate. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Or like building, or like you're building, cuz like we built sets, like the sets were designed, like it was very like kind of hands-on. It's like, "Oh, okay, well, if this doesn't get done,
Yeah.
then the show sucks, and then I don't look good, and then my friends don't look good." And like we're all kind of pushing towards those shows, and that moment. It's like and very applicable to doing sketch and to doing stand up as well, I
Yeah,
think.
absolutely. It's so funny. I don't do a lot of sketch shows, but you and I obviously met at a sketch show. And I remember just like the night before being on the phone with Mike Fogarty, who probably has been on this podcast, I'm willing to bet.
Yeah, he was on a few
Oh,
years ago.
so for the old listeners, yeah. But like being
Mhm.
on the phone with him and being like, hey, like, what else do we need to bring? Like, tell me what you need. Like, I'll make something right now, like, whatever it is. And I like made the ornaments, like, everything. I was just like, we need to, like, whatever you need from me. Like, I'm not just an actor here. And then I showed up the next day and everyone had done that. Like, they had all reached out and being like, what can we do? What can we build? And it was just like, it felt like high school plays again, where I'm like, oh, we're all in this together. And it feels really great.
Oh yeah, that's what I love about doing backdoor
Yeah.
barbecue, especially. Yeah, because that's interesting. So like I just assume everyone that comes in to do guest spots on that show is like an improviser or a sketch actor or a sketch actor. So I know you do improv, but do you do stand up comedy
Oh,
also?
this is really interesting. I'm mainly a stand-up. I make my money from stand-up. Improv and like
Okay.
sketch are like things I do on the side that I'm getting more into sketch. But I am a stand-up like first and foremost. So that's interesting. Yeah, I think I met Mike through a show we do together called Love Is Live, which you've seen.
Hmm.
And
Yes, my wife is a huge fan. We come every month.
it's really good to know. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on it sometime. But we met at Love Is Live, and I remember like it was a show where I had to fill in as one of the hosts because like the host was sick, and so I like filled in for
Uh-huh.
her. And that was like the first time Mike and I ever worked together. And after he came up to me and he was like, "Do you want to do backdoor?" And I like told him that I didn't know a lot about sketch, and he was very welcoming. And him and Paul and Chris were the greatest team to work with for a sketch show that I didn't know a lot
Hmm.
about.
Yeah, I have been doing shows with those guys for like 6 or 7 years now. So they are, I think, like one of the best groups to work for. Because I've also texted some shows that are just like
Yeah.
but they come in like everything's so well organized. Mike and I have like a rapport as far as like the cues and how the timing on everything. Um, interesting. Well, because I'm not just a tech. I've been like a stand up for 15 years. That was the first thing I did in
See, and I
comedy
didn't know that. We're
before.
learning so much about each other.
Yeah, that's what I love about this about doing this podcast is get to learn more about the guest the people I chat with. Okay, so you're doing high school theater, and then graduation happens, and then what happens next? This is all still in
This is
Calgary.
all still in Calgary. I get accepted into university and I'm going to take journalism and I take it like very seriously. Like comedy doesn't even cross my mind anymore because like it actually hadn't. I liked Saturday Night Live and I loved Conan O'Brien. And like other than making people laugh in social circumstances, comedy as like a career never crossed my mind. That didn't seem like a thing that would even be achievable
Mm-hmm.
enough to do. So journalism became like my main thing. And I started working at a local television station called Shaw TV, which is not around anymore, but a few of them will listen to this because we used to work together.
Uh-huh.
And I started working there as a camera person, and then I moved up to being their like audio and switcher person, like working the cameras from like a board, to directing a few episodes of this like psychic TV show that was very weird. And then
Like Miss Cleo.
yeah, like people would call in and be like, "What should I do about my marriage?" And she would be like, "Divorce him." Like it was very insane. And I like got to direct it, which seemed crazy because I was 19. And I met
Uh-huh.
these two other girls there, and they really wanted to produce a show. And I had never produced anything, but they took me out to a dinner, and they're like, "Yeah, you seem to like really know everyone at the station, and you kind of have all the connections. So would you maybe like want to be on it?" And we kind of wanted to be like Wayne's World, and would you be willing to be like the Garth to her Wayne, like the other girl's Wayne? And
Uh-huh.
immediately I was like, absolutely. We did 9 episodes and it got canceled. But
Oh man.
um,
That sounds like a great idea though.
it was fine. Like looking back, it was such a great idea, but we maybe took it a little too seriously. I think it was a lot of responsibility for a 19-year-old to have. Um,
Yeah.
and I just remember feeling like the weight of the world on my shoulders. Like if I messed this up,
Mm-hmm.
the rest of my life was going to be messed up, which is ridiculous at 19. You cannot mess anything up. Well, you can, but not like it's fixable at 19.
Right.
And I just remember right before it got canceled, the girl that was my co-host introduced me to this guy,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a stand-up comedian in Calgary, like a really big one. And I was like, oh, if you ever, I thought he was cute. I was like, if you ever want to get coffee, like I would love that. And we did, and I ended up writing jokes for him because he'd be like, yeah, I'm working on this new joke. Do you want to like help me with it? And I'd write jokes for him. And then when the show got canceled, he was like, you should try stand up because you were a natural like performer on the show. You've been writing these jokes for me. You should try it now. And so that was kind of the beginning of stand up.
Very cool. In
In
Calgary.
Calgary, yeah.
Awesome. And what was and how is stand up in Canada to you versus New York? Because obviously New York is like a world onto itself. But I'm curious, like, is there like a major stylistic difference or tone or pace differences, anything like that?
I mean, I went back. That's such a difficult question because, like, yes, but when something's funny, it's funny. Like, when it works, it works.
Yeah.
And there's this one comedian who I love so much in Calgary. His name's Dale Ward. And we met when I was starting in comedy. He was already like 5 years into it. And then about 6 months ago, I went home for like a holiday for Canadian Thanksgiving. And he like put me on his show that he's like now producing at like the biggest venue that Calgary has, which is Yuck Yucks. And it was really interesting to like meet him again as like adults and as grown-ups after all this life stuff has happened to us. And for him and I to still be telling the same jokes. We were not the same jokes, but the same style, talking about the same things. And if it's funny, it's funny. I do think there are Calgary comedians who lean into being Calgarian and being Canadian and being that like country way. But that also happens in New York, right? Like people lean into the New York thing too. So
yeah,
my motto's always been, there's a quote from Henry Beard, who created the National Lampoon, and he was like, something can look funny and people will laugh, but it's not actually funny. There's a difference. And I think Calgarians sometimes lean into the looking funny.
I understand it exactly what you're saying. And what it makes me think of is I have definitely known the sort of like terminal, like road, like unknown, like national headliner that it's kind of, it's like a very specific kind of act. Like there's always like that act, like they typically crush. I can never remember a single bit they do, or there's always like one or two things I'm like, that's kind of a stock thing that I've heard. There's a certain kind of modem to that sort of comedian. I know exactly what you're talking about. Compared to like somebody that would say is like more of like, I hate using the phrase real comic, but I guess would be more of like their selves, and they're just kind of amplifying themselves as opposed to making themselves like a caricature or a cartoon, if that makes any sense.
100%. And I feel like the thing I always note with those like the headliner that's not really a headliner at these kind of shows is that they have charisma. They're very charismatic. You like watching them on stage, but you're right, they're not saying anything that will connect to you in any kind of way or will make you feel less alone, which is my whole mission with comedy, is just to feel like we're all connected. And I also think this happens in New York. There's a lot of storytellers where they're getting up there and they're telling their story, and it's like a great story. You want to hear it. But then they're like, yeah, I'm a stand-up. I did an hour-long story set the other night. I'm like, no, you're a storyteller and you're a great storyteller, but that is not stand-up comedy. They're different things.
Very much so. Like there's like I love both of those scenes. Like I love a good like theater, black box theater kind of show where you're telling me long form stuff and you're making me laugh along the way, you're making me feel some things. And then I also love like David Tell, like your classic nightclub stand-up comic where it's a lot of like short jokes and like really witticisms with the crowd. Like I love both of those kind of those styles.
I just think they're different things, and I hate when people, like, it's a Venn diagram. There can be crossover, but they are different things.
Yeah, what one of the things I think you might know him is my friend David Lawson. He's been on the show a couple times. Great storyteller. Talks a lot about like like painters. Like painters work in oils and they work in watercolors, or they maybe will work in different mediums. Comedian, same thing.
Absolutely. And I think I was actually having this discussion the other day because, like, a lot of people have asked. I run a production company called Pretty Funny Comedy, and a lot of people have been like, the Pretty Funny podcast, that's going to be a thing, right? And I love podcasts. I think this what we're doing right now. This is like great, and I think it's a great conversation. But until I've known what I wanted to say with a podcast or do with one, I don't want to start playing with those watercolors. And I feel like different forms of art are like different forms of storytelling. Like something can be a great sketch, but a bad stand-up joke. And a bad stand-up joke could never work in an improv set. Like, they all require different things, and there can be crossover. And I love dabbling in all of them. But stand-up just makes me feel like I can breathe. Like, I'm holding my breath while we're doing sketches. Like, I'm hoping that it's funny. But stand-up just feels like breathing.
Yeah, there's something about like getting on that stage and when you take the mic out and you're grooving. I know exactly what you mean. Like since the pandemic, like I go longer in between sets, but every time I get back in, I remember what I love about it, because I get bogged down sometimes in the like constant like fighting about what comedy is and what's okay in comedy anymore, and what's killing comedy and what's not, and I get really frustrated with those debates. But then when I get on stage, I'm just like, oh, okay. Now I remember what it really is, and all again going back to that sharing happiness with whatever crowd happens to be there.
And that's like my main mission has always been, when you're laughing, you're not thinking about your problems. And so if I can help anyone, like, man, the weight of the world right now is intense, like everything that's going on. So if you can just forget about that for 5 seconds because I'm telling a joke about lying in the bathtub crying, great, let's do that. Like, I'll gladly make you laugh at that story. So yeah, I think it's the best feeling in the world, and it really is magic, and there's nothing else like it.
I agree. And because my wife's got very high pressure jobs, so I see like the stress of that, and then I see her like when she cuts loose, like when we're in the back at Love Is Live or when she comes to Backdoor. I see that effect, and it's really, really, really cool. How long have you been in New York City now?
I've been in New York. I just had my 2-year anniversary last week.
Excellent. Very
2 years
very
and
cool.
1 week.
Very,
yeah.
very cool. Excellent. So in 2 years, like you have this production company. So like I know you produce this show Love Is Live. I know you've got a improv gym. What other things do you do with this company?
For sure. So Pretty Funny Comedy started on November 7th of 2021 was our first show. And it started because I moved to New York in February of 2021. And I sat in my apartment for like 2 months. Like, I didn't know what to do. I was going through a horrible breakup, like the worst breakup you could imagine. We had been together for like 4.5 years, and we had moved to the States together. It was just like this horrible breakup. And I like just didn't know what to do with my life. And I ended up taking acting classes online, which, like, you should not take acting classes online. That's harder to do. And there was a guy in my acting class who was like, hey, I'm going to the Pit next week. Do you want to, like, come with me? And like I hadn't left my apartment for like 2 months. I went to see the friend's apartment building, the exterior. I made that walk one of the
Uh-huh.
days, but that's like all I did. Um,
Uh-huh.
and I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. He canceled the day of, but you have to like pre-buy tickets to the pit. And I'm like, it was
Yep.
$30. Like I better go. So I go, and the first person I met was Sunny Atwell, who I know's been on the podcast, right? Yeah,
Yes,
because he
yes.
beat me to it. He messaged me. He's like, I got on here first. But I met him immediately. We did the improv. It was the first time I ever did improv in my entire life, and I met all these amazing women, like just
Uh-huh.
incredible women, and like maybe there was a cute guy there, but maybe there wasn't. It like didn't matter. I was so focused on these like women and building these friendships that they were all like, "Oh, we're gonna be here again next Friday." I'm like, "Then I'll be here too." And I kept going and going and going, and then I was just fine with going. I was like, "We're just doing improv. It's just for fun. Like, this isn't serious at all." And one day I was talking to Sunny, like, "Well, like, is there more than this? Like, do we do more than this, or is this it? Is it going to these jams every Friday?" And he's like, "No, this place used to be so different. Like, I'm not going to do a Sunny impression. It felt like I was leaning into one there.
No. Sure.
Oh, the place used to
And
be so
and
different."
and is this the pit on 29th or the old location on
On
24th Street?
29th, this was like their old one had been closed. And he told me
Ah,
about the
right.
striker in this conversation. He was like, we used to have this big theater where there were multiple stages and people would do shows all the time. And it was like incredible. And we just don't do that anymore. I'm like, well, how would we get a show going? And he's like, well, we would need a producer and nobody wants to produce anymore. And I had no interest in producing because of the Canadian TV show. I was like, I'd been down that road. I didn't like it. I didn't want that pressure again. But I was
Yeah.
talking to all those same women I met that first night. We're all sitting at a table, and I was telling them. And then they're like, well, why don't you just do it? We'll all help you, but put it down as your name, and we'll all help you. And
Mhm.
the next day, I was sitting on my fire escape, really thinking about if I was going to do that. And I was like, man, they're all just so pretty, and they're all just so funny. We could just call it Pretty Funny Comedy and I don't have to do any other work. Like if we call it that, that's the theme. We don't have to connect anything else. We'll just do that. And it turned out I loved it. Like I loved producing. Producing as an adult, way different than a 19-year-old. Like, and producing a
Yeah.
live show was so different and a live comedy show. And it just kind of took off. It became its own show. Pretty Funny Comedy is its own show, and then we
Mhm.
purchase other shows to help like promote their shows or production stuff or directing. So I'm a part of Love Is Live, but I'm part of the not so late night with a foolish boy, Tonight Only Good Times. Like there's all these other shows that we now own, quote unquote.
Uh-huh.
And it all just started with like a table filled with very good looking women is what I like to say.
That is a very successful origin story of this of the table of beautiful women. That doesn't always play out the same way. That's really cool. And yeah, I imagine like just having like a more equal distribution of like the all the different moving parts just kind of makes the overall production a lot smoother.
Absolutely. And like that table of women has now changed and fluctuated as to who's sitting there because people get busy.
Hmm.
And so I like to
Yeah.
refer to that table as like, well, they were like the founding fathers, but they're no longer actively involved with it anymore. But the four of us, it's me, Olivia Benedict, Maggie Metnick, and Proma Koshla. We are like the four, and I'm like the head of it. We're Pretty Funny
Hmm.
Comedy. Yeah.
That's very cool. Um, and let me ask you this. And in terms of marketing, because I feel like comedy shows in New York are such like, because I don't the Creek and the Cave had closed I think by the time you got here, but I spent many years producing in the toils of that was like my CBGBs. Or my like comedy store in the 80s is what I like to call it. And to me, like the biggest like stressor and frustration of producing DIY shows is how do I get people into this room? So what is something that has like really worked in terms of marketing for the shows that you work on?
So something that I didn't even realize I was doing, and like a lot of, I don't want to say anything ever happened by accident because that's not it at all, but I was like single. I had no like desire to date, and all the women at that table had like very serious relationships. So they were all like busy and like full-time jobs and stuff. They were all like busy, and I'm like, well, I'm home. So let's just turn on Instagram Live and like talk about the show. Let's make a story. Let's make a video. Like I was bored and I had these like technical skills to be able to create content. So I did. And that does work. I think in our community, people do talk about how like, oh, you know when there's a pretty funny show because Mackenzie will post about it every single day. And she will message you 20 times a day to see if you're coming. And I do that. But it's so funny how technology takes us so far into the future. But sometimes the original way of doing things is just better. Because if you bark for a show, people are going to show up to that show. I bark for almost every single Pretty Funny show. And it works. Like you get people in the door. You really do.
Yeah. So you're like literally going out into the street with flyers and approaching strangers? Wow.
Yeah,
I admire that.
We did it. We started doing that. We did like a mini tour over the summer. We went to like all these little cities, and we did it in Philadelphia for the first time ever. And it just worked so well. We like filled up this theater with Philadelphia people, and like our following hit like 1,000 after we did that. So I was like, oh, like this works. And so I started doing it in like Times Square and Union Square. Please nobody come murder me now that you're listening to this. But always do it with people. I don't do it alone. A few times I've done it alone, but that's like, I like to live life dangerously. But like, it's fine.
Sure.
I think it just honestly, because people want to know what they're coming to see at that show. And the truth is, Pretty Funny Comedy is me. Like, I like to call her like my roommate that I have to like live with because she feels like a different persona. And like half of her clothes take up my closet, so feels like a roommate. But like she is me and I am her. So when I'm promoting the show, people want to like interact with me because that's like what's going to be at the show.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Like, because again, like comedy is like very personal, and you're like so much you. I could. No, that makes total sense. Wow, so like that is, I know so few stand-ups that have the wherewithal to do that because I think we've all just been scarred from Broadway Comedy Club and like all these clubs where we've been like taken advantage of for so long. But there's something to like doing that when it's like your thing.
Yes,
and
when it's your money on the line, it's a little different. Yeah.
Oh no, exactly. That's why I'm always like super empathetic of like, probably more empathetic than I am of like record labels and like TV networks. It's like, a lot of money goes into making this stuff, and like, it's got to make sense, business, and what have you. But that's really cool. I'm like learning. I'm like being inspired by you, and your gumption. And Love is Live, like I'm trying to remember the first one I went to. So I'll tell you the story because my wife and I are regulars at that show now. We'll be at the February one.
Wait, have you bought tickets yet?
I did
okay,
today.
Next time tell me because if you guys are regulars, we could get you a free one. Like, let me know next time. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, I'll. That's nice of you. I appreciate that. Sure. So I remember we were in the middle of Central Park, like, because we were meeting up with some friends, and I get my group text with the Backdoor Barbecue guys, and Mike is like, "Hey, I'm playing like a sexy assistant in this live dating show. If you guys are interested," and I turned to Chelsea and I go, "Do you want to see Mike be a sexy assistant in a live dating show at the Pit?" And she's like, yeah, why haven't you already bought tickets for this? Why are we even having this conversation? It was like the quickest sell, easiest
Yeah.
sell of all time. And that's including my shows. But so that show like goes like incredible because again I feel like that's a form that I think people are really familiar with. It's interactive, so I feel like people get like really invested. Like I've seen crowds like boo if they don't agree with who gets with the person getting
It
cut.
gets rowdy.
Oh yeah, and like I love being in the back, just being like, this is very very cool to see. And then the what else I was gonna say, because I feel like that's a show like I see like very much see like I very much can see that show like being in like Vegas or like a big or like a big club, or like that show could go on the road. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. That show, it really is those girls. I'm so incredibly biased because I love them so much, but it doesn't matter because like we've had, I won't name names, but we've had like contestants and sweethearts who are like jerks and they're like not great people, and I'm like, I have no interest in finding you a soulmate. But you go on there not to watch them, you go on there to watch Olivia be the bottle girl and for Erin to talk about how lonely she is that week. Like they are playing caricatures of themselves. But like it works. They're so entertaining, and I think it goes back to the human condition of like wanting to watch people do normal things in an unnormal way, which is what this is.
Mm-hmm.
It's dating in a very uncomfortable way.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, and it's the kind of like dating show, because how tired are we of seeing stand-up comics talk about how dating's weird? Like that, like you can get like, but like this you can get like really really into. I'm so and I just love seeing that room packed. It's very exciting. I like seeing my newest friends succeed.
Well, and I mean, it gets packed because Mike is playing a sexy assistant, like you said. So that's what's bringing them in, those lover boys.
Exactly. Well, it's important to have a core of just raw human sexuality.
Of course,
just running through everything, and then like, and I also love like the choice of music, because I can just see the like Bravo edits in my head. You know what I mean?
Thank you, because that was like a big thing I introduced. They were doing like very like 70s disco music, which is also great. But then I was like, I think it needs to be a little bit more CW is what I called it. So it's funny that you said Bravo, because I was like, I want it to be a little bit funny, steamy. Yeah, no, it's such a good show, and honestly, it's because of people like, I know we just like joked, but like Mike Fogarty is such a good guy and is such a wonderful person to work with, and he's one of the parts that like helps that show stay together. And Jack Dominic, our tech, we have new lover boys, Matt and Jack. Like it's great. It's such a good team.
That's really really cool. And how has stand up been for you lately? How's that been going?
Stand up's been really good. I think what I've been doing lately, and it's gonna sound really messed up, and I don't want it to be a therapy session again, but whenever I get so deeply upset about something is when I'm like, oh, but this is really good. And that all started because I have really bad panic attacks. Like they just fill my body and I can't, they're like debilitating. And about a year ago, I was having one and it hadn't been that bad for like a long time. And I was like, you need to like center yourself. And so I like climbed into my bathtub and like turned on the shower, like fully dressed. And I just like laid in the bathtub with like the water running. And I like wrote this joke about it, about how like that's how I knew I was like in a bad place, because like you're laying down in the shower. That's not something a healthy person does. And I wrote this joke about it, and it was my first joke that ever went viral. Like that people love. If I'm doing bad on stage, I'll just suddenly be like, have you guys ever laid down in the shower? And people like lose it. Like they love that joke. And so now whenever anything's going on in my life that isn't great, because life isn't great sometimes, I'm like, but how can you write it into a joke and then tell it on stage and not have people feel bad for you, because that happens. The reverse happens. They feel bad and then it's awkward. But instead be like, if you've ever felt this way, you're not alone. Because so many people have come up to me and been like, I didn't think other people lay down in the shower. I thought that was a me thing. And I'm like, no, we all do it. We just don't talk about it. So yeah, luckily life has been a little hard lately, so I've gotten a lot of material.
I'm both. I hope it all turns out all right, but then I also hope it's all hilarious.
I hope it's all hilarious too.
Yeah, that's my go-to. Like I used to say, when I'd hear like a friend's getting divorced or something, my natural inclination used to be, oh, I'm sorry, but now my inclination is like, congrats.
Nice.
Well, that's very cool. What is something that you want to make that you haven't yet? Because I like to manifest goals on the show too. I could talk about some of mine if that would help.
Because mine are going to be like, if you don't give me a window to talk in, it'll be crazy. I'm like, I want longer hair. Like, it'll be weird. So.
Right. Well, last year I accomplished one by putting out my a music EP I've been wanting to do for a long time. So I finally did that. My next goal, and it's going to require like getting back up on stage more regularly, is I really want to get an album recorded, or even if it's just like half an hour for stand up. And that I think will be my next goal before I start, like, I don't know, finally finishing that script I always talk about. So those are like my next couple things when it comes to creative stuff.
That's amazing. I honestly, not to bring him up twice and his head's going to explode because I brought him up twice, but Sunny Atwell just did his first, I guess, special. And it was like an hour long. Did you get to watch it? I think he's done it a few times now.
I haven't watched it yet, but he did tell me about it.
Of course he did. Anyways, I watched the first one, and I remember it being an hour long. And like he got off stage, and I was talking to a mutual friend of ours, and I'm like, holy shit, he just talked for an hour. Like it like blew my mind. And the friend was like, isn't that what you're working towards? And a part of me was like, yeah, of course it is, but it's also not. Like, I love stand-up. I really want to master parts of it, but I'm so envious of people who want to do a special, like a 30-minute thing. I just don't think I'm there yet, and I want to get there one day, but that's not a current goal for me. I love listening to it. Let me know when you do your special. I'll be front row. But I think right now what I'm focused on is we're going to be doing another tour this summer, and we're going to be doing some of the bigger cities. And this is going to sound so crazy, and I've never really talked about it publicly before, but the way Taylor Swift, I'm sorry I'm bringing her up again, the way Taylor Swift's production value is like this incredible thing where it doesn't matter if you think she's like a good singer or a good songwriter. At her shows, it feels like an event that you're a part of. That is what I want for the Pretty Funny shows, is I want it to feel like you actually aren't there for the comic, you're there for this like event that you're like participating in with them. It makes you feel like you're included in it. So that's my focus right now for the tour of how to make that happen. Right now, the only thing I can think about is confetti would be the best way to make that happen. But yeah, that's something I've been working on. I also, this is weird because I'm telling you things I haven't told a lot of people yet, but it's.
Oh no, this is great. This is great.
I always wanted to like write something and have it be a little bit outside of comedy. I think there'll always be comedy linked in it because, like we talked about at the beginning of this, it's something that just helps communicate points. I've always wanted to write this book, and this story has been like in my head for as long as I can remember, but like it's two characters, and the other character I could never really fully picture. And then recently someone sent me a stand-up video of like this guy who I don't know very well, and they just sent it to me for stand-up purposes. And I was like, oh, like there was just a joke he told, and the way he told it I was like, that's the character in the book that I've been trying to write for 10 years. So I'm like, I wrote like 100 pages today. I suddenly can see the story so much more clear now. And that's something I'm excited about. If that could get published in like a 2-year time span, that would be amazing. But if that doesn't happen, I won't cry.
That's really I dig that. What a cool idea. I'll be the moderator for your book event.
Thank you. I would love that.
I'll be the like person in the in the suit that's just like, and we're like, you have a table of glass water. It's like, so what were you envisioning for the greater societal commentary or whatever?
Gladly,
like
I would love that. That would actually be a dream. For people to care enough about something that I wrote to like warrant a moderator, I would love that. That would be a dream come true.
Well, excellent. This has been great. What can we plug before we get out here? What are all the shows Pretty Funny does?
Just if you follow Pretty Funny Comedy, I have to start saying the full name, LLC reason. So Pretty Funny Comedy. I'm so used to saying Pretty Funny. Pretty Funny Comedy. If you follow us on Instagram, you'll see all of our other shows. It's the easiest way to find us.
Well, awesome. You guys are an LLC?
Yeah.
Oh, I gotta start. I guess you're my new hero, Mackenzie. As far as like the business side of this, so this has been really great. I really appreciate you doing the show. Thank you.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much.
If you're creating DIY shows in New York City, I really think that there is a lot of really great and useful, helpful information, and a lot of things to inspire yourself in the way Mackenzie approaches producing her shows, which are great. I'm a regular attendee, and I've worked with her. She's got a lot of the right stuff, so I feel inspired after that conversation. So Pretty Funny Comedy, everything they do, you find them on Instagram. Links are in the description. And if you enjoyed this and want to listen to more, you can go to awesomedisaster.com. Has links to everywhere you can get the podcast: Apple, Stitcher, Spotify. If you want to tell a friend and let other people know that this is a cool show worth your time, then this is that is the best, one of the things you can do that will also help out the show. And I really am appreciative. You guys are my biggest supporters, and the more than any marketing team could do. So thank you very much to everyone who listens. If you want to go a little bit further in support of the show, you can find links to all my social media. I am at WillCarey23 on Instagram. I'm at Comic Will Carry on Twitter, and at Will Carry on Hive. Got in early on that. We'll see if it sticks around. And you guys can also check out our merch store, which is at awesomedisaster.com as well as our Patreon, patreon.com/awesomedisaster. Again, everything I do is at awesomedisaster.com. I'm going to continue to be excited for the upcoming Back to Our Barbecue shows in this week. And I got a lot of big plans leading into Valentine's Day that I intend to spend some groovy, fun times. It's so ridiculous. I am planning to aim on the side of awesome for the next couple weeks. So thank you all again so much for being here, and I will see you next time between awesome and disaster. Stay safe, wear a mask, get vaxxed and boosted, and stomp out fascism. Take care, everybody.